Welcome to Relationship Mastery, a podcast for those who want to learn how to master the art of creating happy, healthy, and loving relationships. Please join me, Adey-Jones, and my co-host, Barry Selby, each Tuesday at 1 p.m. Pacific for a lively and informative conversation on everything to do with relationships. Welcome, everybody, and welcome, Barry. Good to see you again.
Good to see you too.
Yeah. So this week we are going to be talking about wisdom, our inner wisdom, often known by other words such as universal intelligence, intuition, inner guidance, God for some people, spirit, the universe. For me, it's an amalgamation of all of those things. I call it my wisdom. But the reason I wanted to talk about this is so often, and I'm sure you experience this too when you're doing your coaching, we can speak with our clients about their relationships, and and so many of them are in their heads, trying to decide what to do. Should I stay? Should I go? Is this the right person for me? Isn't it all this stuff? And it's all going on in here. And I know for me, I try and encourage people to spend the least amount of time as possible in this very messy place called our heads. Our heads are fabulous. Our brains are problem solvers. They love to jump in there and try and give you its opinion on what you should do, what pros and cons list you should write. But I think if we're really looking for guidance as to is this the right relationship for us? Should we stay? Should we go? I think the only place you're really going to get those answers from is from your wisdom. And the quieter you can get so that you can hear that inner guidance, the better it's going to be for you. So what's your opinion? I can see your mouth moving, Barry. And I can hear your brain chuntering away there.
Well, it's funny because at the same time, brain, as to paraphrase what you said, one of my favorite quotes about this is that the mind is a wonderful servant but a terrible master.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what we're talking about here. The thing for me that is cracking me up is that the number of times I've spoken to clients about this conversation, in this sort of theme about relationship breakup and that sort of stuff, is whenever we get to the point of they suddenly go, oh, I realize I should probably have left. There's always a follow-up, becomes almost always a follow-up saying, I always knew that, but I didn't listen to that part of me. So it's not so much they don't listen, it's the fact they've listened to it and ignored it. And that's the biggest thing, is that I suspect for most people, because I know for myself, this is now big I can practice this, and it has for you, that innate wisdom, that inner guidance, that still small voice, for whatever you want to call it, we hear it. The thing is, what do we do with it? How do we respond to it? Do we actually believe in it? Do we do anything about it? Or do we try to hammer up the doorway to block it out so it doesn't come in? Because the thing is, for most people, I suspect, I haven't done a survey to prove this, of course, but I suspect that everybody has that quiet voice that gives them the truth, gives them the right answer, that gives them the best guidance. However, our ego usually has different plans. So, for example, with relationship-centric conversation, there's often the ego is attached to being right or to proving a point or something else, whereas the little voice is saying, just walk away. And I've had that more than once, and I've experienced it more than once myself. And so the disparity of those two parts becomes a choice that we often choose the wrong part, in the sense that we stay with the ego side, or the brain-mind side, which is where the ego lives, rather than listening to that deeper place that knows the truth and may not give us the immediate victory we think we want, but gives us much more long-term peace and fulfillment.
It's so interesting. I love doing these shows with you, Barry, because we are so different.
Yeah, I know.
But that's what makes this such a fabulous conversation. I hear you saying, the ego wants to be right and wants the victory. And I'm thinking so often in my case, and in a lot of my clients' case, it's been more that the ego wants to keep you safe, and change is scary. And the ego is arguing for you to keep the status quo, to stay in a relationship, when your wisdom is screaming, get out now, you're okay, you'll be okay. change is difficult, but we've got your back. It's going to be, your life is going to be amazing. You can't make a mistake. and
Hmm.
and so it's really, often I think it's the, like I said, for me certainly, and for a lot of my clients, it's the, I used to call it my codependent thinking. I mean, my personal thinking, my codependent thinking,
Yeah.
whatever that is. But I know that when I was, considering leaving a relationship that was incredibly painful on
Mhm.
an emotional level, but my thinking was, it's not that bad. At least he doesn't hit you.
Right.
Stay, and all of those arguing. And really, all it was it was just terrified of change. It was terrified of the unknown. It
Hmm.
wanted to keep me safe. It thought, what's the phrase? Better the devil you know than the one you don't. And
Kind of.
yeah, so it's, so that's why I say, just be so careful of where that energy is coming from the personal mind or the ego, whichever you want to call it. Whether it's the energy you were describing, which is, I want to be right. This could be, there's something better out there for me, or could it be a number of things, or it could be the one, like I said, of, stay safe, stay small, sort of expect little, settle for less, that type of energy. Both of them are coming from, they're not coming from expansion, they're not coming from love,
Exactly.
they're coming
Yeah.
from fear. Fear.
Absolutely. And that, I mean, to be honest, that whole thing about being right is really avoidance of truth, is avoidance of vulnerability. It is, in a way, coming from fear because for many people, maybe it's just, maybe probably just the men, but I think it's kind of true for the men that we hold on to being right as our safety. Like being right is where we're okay. Because if we're not right, we're dead. There's kind of this programming inside. It's like, we survive and we win if we're right, but if we're not right, we're doomed, sort of things. There's that definite disparity, which is the same sort of fear base. The other part, though, I want to flip the script a little bit just as well, because something you said that reminded me is also oftentimes, grass always greener, you mentioned. I know for myself, just me, maybe about anybody else, but just for me, I've left relationships where maybe that little voice was telling me to stay. That
Mm,
actually my ego was saying, I can do better. I don't want to do something else. I want to go somewhere else. I wanted to be right about it. But the ego was not the truth, or the little voice inside was saying, there's more here. This is where you want to be, but you're scared of being here
mm,
because there's a place on both sides. So that voice isn't always the voice of saying, get out.
yeah,
Oftentimes, what that voice is telling us is basically the opposite of what we think we need. And
yeah.
that's the challenge, you know?
Tell me more, Barry.
So okay, so then, I mean, I've shared the basic premise. I'm just giving you another layer of it in previous episodes about the fact I would leave relationships very quickly
Hmm.
early on because again there'll be an argument. I would shut down and I would leave because I was raised with the programming that there were no arguments in love. That's the way my family was. Wasn't good. It's just the way it was. And I'm sure if I look back with clear eyes and real understanding, I would know that the part of me inside knew deeply that the relationship I was in was much better than I thought it was. And that my quitting was my limitation. It wasn't what the relationship was about. And in
Yeah.
fact, that argument would have been a breakthrough to another level. I know it would have been. Having an argument that we, quote, survived and got beyond would have been another level of possibility. So I know for myself, a lot of my younger relationships ended a lot earlier prematurely, is a good word for it, because of my own fear that I couldn't get through that hurdle,
Hmm.
and that I know the wisdom inside would have said, "Keep going," but I didn't listen to it. I wasn't even aware it was there, frankly, for the first decade or so of my dating life.
Yeah.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, no, absolutely, and I love that, and yeah, totally answered it. And because what I see there, what you're recognizing is that because of the modeling which we've talked about before, where you didn't see, healthy, conflict resolution between your parents, you didn't see any, you didn't even see, it wasn't even unhealthy because there was no conflict resolution. There
Right.
was just, we just
Exactly.
don't do that. So you obviously had a fear of confrontation, and so when the opportunity to go into difficult situations, go into difficult conversations was presented itself for you, and which would have been a massive growth for you to be able to handle those, you just bolted. So it,
Yeah.
it would be clear that you're just going to bring in the exact same situation again and again and again
Oh, yes.
till Barry gets to be able to have conflict in a healthy way.
Yep, that was the way it worked.
Yeah, exactly. And for me, oh, this is so embarrassing, but I'm gonna do I usually
Hey,
do
I did one, you
spill
can do
spill my guts here. I I sometimes talked myself into a relationship to be safe. That's a
one.
huge
Ooh,
one. I was
wow.
sharing this with somebody yesterday that one of my very first, I won't name names, and I'll try and keep it
Innocent.
as as non-identifiable as possible. But
Mhm,
I was in a relationship when I was very young, and I'm embarrassed to even admit it. I've given myself a break. I was very, very young, and I was very hurt. But I was in the relationship to literally take me out of action, as it were, to put myself on the shelf, to not have
mhm.
myself be out there because my boundaries were so weak and so
Yeah.
unhealthy that I literally had to, and this is a weird word to use, but I had to sort of be taken, like the occupied sign, like, oh,
Mhm.
occupied, not available,
Yeah.
no vacancy here, just to stop myself from being vulnerable. So I stayed in relationships where I wasn't, I liked the person, but I certainly wasn't in love with them because it
Right.
was safe. And that's something that I have seen as a pattern in my life.
Yeah.
And it's not the proudest moment to admit that, but I
Oh,
also give myself a break. As I say, I know that I didn't. I mean, I'm much more aware now and conscious. I didn't say, oh, but I knew somewhere deep down inside me, just like we were saying, wisdom was saying,
mhm.
you're doing this for the wrong reasons.
Right.
This is not the healthy way to be in a relationship, to hide out, to hide within a relationship.
Mhm.
And I'm sure I'm not the only one that's done that. I
I
could
don't
be.
think so. No, no,
I
no, I
could
don't think
be.
so. Well,
But
here's a couple of things on that.
yeah,
First of all, we're both talking about much younger parts of ourselves that really did the best that they could at that point. So
yeah,
we know as much more mature adults, we look back with some level of compassion and kindness back at that younger part of ourselves. This is the thing, is that what we're talking about here is stuff that we are looking back, we didn't know better. But now we do know better. Ideally, we do better.
yeah.
But that's
Mhm.
the thing, is you holding a grudge against ourselves. Well, I mean, yeah, I wish I could have passed back to my 20-year-old the knowledge I have now, 4 decades later. However, that's not at this point in time possible. So I
Mhm.
just give myself a break at that age, sort of thing. Make peace with that, and know that now I do better. But it does take that wisdom and ability to look back and see where we didn't listen to that inner wisdom. So now we do listen to it as a choice because we recognize it does do us good and serves us to listen to that voice.
Yeah,
So I mean, for both of us, I think we we make mistakes.
absolutely. And that's the beauty of being able to acknowledge those mistakes and speak about them. This is how we
Yeah.
get to the people. And again, this is the beauty of coaching. We get to actually share our stories. We get to
Yes.
actually say, "Hey, me too." There's no shame in this.
Hmm.
And the other one, which I finally let myself off the hook for, because I did beat myself up badly and say, "Gosh, how could you have been so? How could you have used another person in that way to hide behind as a shield in
Right.
life, so that you didn't get hurt, knowing that they couldn't hurt you because you weren't that invested in them." Um,
Hmm.
but I had to come to the place of knowing that, you know, they also were in the relationship for whatever they needed to learn and get out of it as
Yes.
well. And so that's part of the healing and part of letting yourself off the hook when you cop to these things, though you're like, oh God, I can't believe I did that. is is
Nobody's a passenger. We're both participants in that
exactly. And
experience. Yeah. Yeah.
this is our next show, Barry. This is a great one. Nobody's a passenger. Because
Yep.
it is. It's when we are being over responsible for all the players in a situation. But again, as I said, that's another show. But back to that intuition, you know,
Yes.
it was, God, did my ego fight with that intuition, because everything in my being, in my body, was saying, no, doesn't feel right. This is not right. But I was overriding it. I was in my head going, no, this is the decision I'm going to make because I am damn sure I'm never going to get hurt again. And this
Right.
is the only way I know how to do it. Because
Hmm.
I didn't even not trust other people. I didn't trust myself. That was the thing. I didn't trust myself not to get myself in another situation where I'd get hurt. So this way it was I was taking myself out of play, as it were, out of being available to excuse me, to be in another relationship with that potential to get hurt.
That's the thing. The wisdom. I mean, I'll share one little story that this wasn't a relationship, but it was definitely. Um, how can I say this? Okay, so when I was 21, I was living in Hamburg at the time, and I had basically just come back from a failed attempt by my friends to get me laid on the Reeperbahn in Hamburg, which is the red light district. And I
Oh,
was
this
staying.
is a good one. I have to take a breath here. There was no warning that this is going to come from Barry.
Sorry, I've had some experience in life,
Okay,
but anyway.
I'm gonna make you say that again. We need to give that a better.
So again, so this is this. I was celebrating my 21st birthday. I was living in Germany, in Hamburg, for a couple of years, and my 21st birthday happened during that time. And I was basically failed. I say failed attempt. Basically, my friends thought they'd do me a favor because
Mhm,
at that time I was a virgin. Just to be also transparency, just everybody knows that now.
mhm,
They were trying to get me laid by going to the Reeperbahn for one of the prostitutes. That was the plan. And we went to a couple of bars, and it was so how can I say this? Depressing, because it wasn't as the glamour is not there by any second means. Anyway, so we came back to the apartment, and I had housemates in the apartment we lived in, and one of the sorry the there was a guy and a girl who had the apartment. One of the girlfriends of the girl came over and decided she wanted to sleep with me,
mhm.
and I didn't know at the time, but in hindsight, I found out that her boyfriend, who was in the military, was away that weekend. And so she wanted to get her rocks off just to feel good and to get back at him. I'm so glad I did. Well, it's not so much I did. I had no choice. My inner guidance stopped me functioning in
Mhm,
bed with her. Now,
mhm,
this is me at the time, 21 years old, with this gorgeous blonde woman who was, German beauty, everything else. I mean, vision beyond compare. But I couldn't function with her.
mhm.
And I look back now and I have extreme clarity of knowing that what was happening was that inner guidance shut me down for my own safety.
Yeah.
Because if I had slept with her, like had sex with her and the whole thing that
Mhm.
happened, the boyfriend would have killed me. You know, I mean, this is a very small scenario that happened very quickly. But I look back now and realize also part of that was that's the other part I knew for myself. And this is just the way my makeup is I couldn't just have one night stands. That wasn't wired that way either. So two things were happening at the same time, but I know vividly that a part of me was preserving my safety. And
Mm,
that was probably the first glimpse I had of my inner wisdom speaking up, or I should say, acting up. So it was actually taking action inside of me.
yeah.
So I'm sorry it wasn't as lascivious as you wanted it to be,
I
but
know. Quite honestly, Barry, it was far more than I thought you were ever going to share. I'm very proud of you for going
thank
there.
you. Well, just parts of my history I haven't shared before.
Exactly. No, I think that's brilliant, and I love that story, and I love how I mean, it's really touching to me to hear how connected you were to your inner wisdom, and that even at that age, even though the the pressure from outside, from your friends, and from the pressure of this beautiful woman's there, you had that self preservation. You had something inside of you that said, "No, this is not right." And I find that really touching and poignant too. My favorite word, one of my favorite words.
Nice.
You know, I'm thinking about how many times I was in a situation where my instincts were screaming, "This is not right. This is not right." You know, no, whatever. And my programming or conditioning or whatever it
Hmm.
um, was overriding it. Was trying to make sense of something that my body was screaming, "This is not right."
Hmm.
And you know, and it's sad that when we have been as abused as children, when we do have that inner voice inside of us screaming, "This is not right," and for whatever reason you either get the message that you shouldn't tell, or that if you do tell and the message is, oh no, you must have imagined it, that didn't happen, or whatever that is that has you disconnect. It's not, okay, I'm going to rephrase that. You are never disconnected from your wisdom. Choose not to listen to it, is what I was going to say. That you choose to dial it down and turn up that inner voice, that voice in our head that's trying to make sense of everything, trying to make
Right.
everything okay, trying to tell a story around it, whether it's the story of it wasn't that bad, it didn't happen, or whatever it was that your head is telling you. And so that's also what I want for me was huge. Was my connection again? I hear a lot from my clients. How do you know when it's your inner wisdom? How do you know when it's your wisdom speaking over what your head is telling you? And for me, it's so clear these days. But there were years where I couldn't have told you which one was which at all,
Yeah,
because
totally.
because I had, as I said, I'd deliberately, for survival, shut out that inner wisdom, because to me it was too painful. It's like, hang on a minute, who are you going to believe here? You're going to believe your childlike wisdom over an adult who's supposed to take care of you? Of course you're going to say, well, I must be wrong, my wisdom or intuition or whatever that inner voice is must be wrong, because you want to believe the adults, you want to trust them. So, but even if you have been in that situation where you have dialed that down or not chosen to listen to it or dismissed it for years, it's never disconnected. It's always there. And the more that you tune into it, the more the feeling will let you know you're in the right direction. And it is a feeling. It's not an intellectual, oh, that sounds like it's a little more true than the other stuff that's going on in my head. It's the feeling.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's a quiet inner nudge, and sometimes it's a scream. Sometimes it's like, where the hell did that voice come from? So it doesn't has a different quality to it, but it's the truth.
Well, I want to offer one thing as well, because, well, first of all, that experience when I was in 21, my ego didn't like what happened. Just to be transparent, it wasn't like I was all on board with my inner voice. I just just to be clear. But fast forwarding to my inner wisdom, because I've used the phrase a couple of times, but that still small voice. That's the one I really find is my um, inner guidance, so to speak. And for me, one of my prime examples I've had in the last 20 years is when I wrote my book, because I didn't write a book. I basically just posted some social media things about relationships 15 years ago. And once I finished doing that, I saved the little quotes I'd put up, just things I just thought, oh, this will be true. Let me put that up. And I would literally just write things out, put them up, little paragraphs. I saved them in a Word document, not going to do anything with them. So I write, but I do a blog post or something. This is when I had the most auditory, but auditory experience of the inner voice. Because once I asked the question, which is a dangerous thing to do if you don't want to have your inner voice help you, is don't ask any questions. Ask the question, what am I going to do with this? It's like sitting here, I've got these like 55 something different ideas. What do I do with this? And I literally heard inside what's coming from my head, it was somewhere else, said, write a book. And basically, it was like I felt like I was swatting a fly away. Like, no, it's nothing, not interested, not interested, and kept them going on. Over a period of about 2 weeks, I would get to a point just going, I'm not sure what I'm going to do with this, do something. The voice would simply say, write a book. And the thing about it was, it never changed tone.
Mm,
It was calm. It was peaceful. It was a very simple and soft voice, but it was persistent.
mm,
That was the key, because it didn't let up. And so over 2 weeks, it was like, no, I'll do something. No, I'm not sure what I'm going to do. Write a book. And eventually what happened was in the end of 2 weeks, and I remember sitting contemplating this at the time, and I finally had enough, because the voice hadn't changed, but I had.
mm.
I'd gotten more upset because the voice kept persisting. It was like, damn it, you know. And I sort of turned internally to that voice and said, fine, how do I do it? And
Yeah.
it showed me everything I needed to do.
Oh, that's so
But it was
fabulous.
but
I
the
love
thing
that.
was, I had to give up my own attachment to get the result, and it was such a gift, because the book happened. I had the first draft in 6 weeks, because I
Mm,
didn't realize I'd already created everything I needed to. I just needed to put it together.
mhm.
And then my ego took over and got panicked, and I took a year to finish it. So the inner voice has great gifts when we listen to it, and that was the thing is, for me, my personal experience, because again, as you said, like you're someone that gets very loud. It's very different for everybody.
Yeah.
But my inner guidance, thankfully, is persistent, which I need, because sometimes I don't listen to it the first time I hear it,
Yeah.
and that's one of the things that I'm glad for.
I love what you're saying, and just like you said, it's different for everybody. And mine doesn't. mine can be gentle and it can be loud.
Hmm.
And it's almost, I had one experience once. I was in this relationship with a very spiritual person. And
Hmm.
I remember exactly what my thoughts were. And I was thinking, oh, they're so wonderful. And I was having all these lovely, warm, fuzzy feeling thoughts. And all of a sudden, like out from the left came this booming voice going, wolf in sheep's clothing. And I was like, what? Where did that come from? Because I knew
Right.
what my personal thinking, my brain was thinking, was like, it was all like in like sort of, la la land of how great this person was. And I was like,
Hmm.
whoa, where did that? But I had to pay attention to it. And I looked in that direction and 100% wolf in sheep's clothing.
Yep.
And then I had another one once. These are my most profound ones where um, again, the voice was so loud and it just said, get out. Again, I knew what I was thinking at the time because it came from a different direction. So it was so clear that it wasn't my thinking because it had a different
Hmm.
quality to it, a different sound to it, and almost seemed to come from a different place. As I said, it sort of almost came from, I don't know, just a different place. It wasn't coming from my head, my thinking. And that was, get out now before he kills you.
Oof.
And I was like, oh, I did not want to hear that one.
Right.
But
You listen to that.
it was really clear. And
Mm.
I was like whiplash. I was like, whoa. And it's like, how do you ignore that? How do you
Right.
ignore that?
Thankfully, you don't.
Yeah. So basically, yeah. So don't again. It's different for everybody, and it can be different within you. Sometimes the
Mhm.
message is more urgent, and it needs a little bit. It's not the nice nudging, patient voice to carry.
Very true.
Write the book. Sometimes it is a little bit more like, get out now. Now,
Yeah.
you're dying. So, yeah, just, I always, I mean, for me, as I say, I encourage my clients to just keep feeling into it. The feeling will tell you what's your inner voice and what's your personal thinking. So what do you say to your clients when they say, I don't know which one to believe, I'm getting conflicting voices in my head? What would you say to them?
Usually, the way, and this is interesting to say it this way, the inner voice is usually right, but our ego thinks it's right. And so it is a challenge sometimes to differentiate the two. The recognition, though, for most times, is notice the feelings you get from listening to each one,
Yeah.
because the feelings will tell you what's going on. If you feel reassured and feel almost that you don't need to do anything, like there's a voice that basically giving instruction is like, I just know this is the right thing, And the thing is, we do, and this is kind of intuition on top of inner wisdom. But when we get the inner wisdom speaking voice speaking, oftentimes it's just like, of course. Whereas when it's more of that ego voice or the different voice speaking in, there's a lot more emotion mixed in with it usually. So generally, that's the differentiation for me. I don't know if it's the same for you or not.
Um, no, for me, it's if I'm just listening to the voice, there is certainty. There's no waffling.
Right.
It's clear.
Yeah.
It's concise. There's an energy behind it, like a strength.
Hmm.
Um, and I think the waffling comes in when the personal mind is in fear and starts saying, yeah, but this, yeah, but that, So that's where the waffle comes in. But
Hmm.
it can still be scary. You don't, not the voice isn't scary, but your personal mind doesn't want to hear often what it's telling you. And that's where the fear comes again. It comes from the ego. But again, you just feel into it. And the more that you know that, your wisdom would never steer you wrong. They're all the same thing, wisdom, inner guidance, intuition. It's all the
Exactly.
same
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's never going to steer you wrong. It
No. The
always
thing
has,
is,
it always has your back. It's
right.
You are protected. You're going to be okay.
The one thing I'll add to that is oftentimes the voice that's not the inner voice is trying to convince us.
Yeah,
Because the inner wisdom, that inner voice, is never convincing us. It just tells us what it is. Like it lays it out. This is the way it is,
yeah,
and that's really the difference. I think would be the best way to summarize it too. Yeah, I think you're right. Definitely.
yeah, yeah. Wow. Well, that was another great one, Barry.
Some self exposure there. Yes.
Yeah. Do not go away and have an emotional hangover. We're going to do that one as well. Emotional hangovers when we've
Boy,
shared deeply, but no, when we share deeply, we are giving each other such a gift. We are giving each other permission to share, our truth, and by sharing. Oh, I heard a beautiful quote this weekend, which I've completely forgotten, but I think it was something about healing cannot occur in isolation. It is
oh,
it occurs in communion with others. I thought that was
nice.
so beautiful.
I like it.
Yeah. So by us sharing our stories, we hopefully are helping other people tap into theirs and find some healing
Ideally
as
so.
well.
Absolutely.
Mm.
So next week,
Next
we'll see you
next
then.
week. Okay. Thanks so much. Thank you, everybody. We will see you next week. Bye, Barry.
Bye, Del. See you next week. We trust you enjoyed this episode and invite you to share this with your friends and loved ones. In fact, please subscribe to our Relationship Mastery podcast. That way you'll get each new episode fresh and shiny as soon as it is released. We'd love to hear from you as well. So go ahead and enter your questions and comments at relationshipmastery.show. Take good care. We will connect with you in our next episode of Relationship Mastery.